And we initiate the session 2, Workforce Planning. The session on workforce planning will provide a practical guide on how organizations and HR should look at their workforce manpower plans differently, incorporating it, imbibing the new labor code in their operating models, among others. For this session, we will be joined by Mr. Suresh Dutt Tripathi, former Vice President HR Tata Steel. Mr. Tripathi is the chairperson and the moderator of the session. The session will also have panelists, including Ms. Rachna Mukherjee, CHRO, Schneider Electric, India and South Asia. We are joined by Mr. Piyush Mehta, Chief Human Resource Officer, Genpact, and we will shortly be joined by Mr. Raj Raghavan, Senior Vice President and Head of Human Resource, Indigo Airlines. We also acknowledge the presence of Chairperson of the program, Mr. S.Y. Siddiqui, and Program Director, Ms. Manu Vadhwa. I hand over the session to the session chair, Mr. Suresh Dutt Tripathi. Over to you, Suresh.
I think it's a privilege to be here today moderating this session on workforce planning. Thank you, Manu, for wonderful format that you have for this program, where we are trying to create an HR playbook, because each session should end up in creating a kind of a playbook for each of the participants. And there's a lot of key takeaway that goes with it. And that will be something very practical for people to take back and implement in their organization. I think that's the key takeaway from this whole program. So thank you for that wonderful construct, Manu. A wonderful panelists with me. It's a pleasure to have all of them on this panel. I think in the inaugural session, as well as in the previous session, I think a lot has been talked about what has happened and how the change which has come has caused disruption. And because of that, a lot of things which have changed. A lot of business models have changed. The way people have been looking at work. The work itself has changed. The workplace has changed. Workforce definitely has changed in terms of the kind of people who are available to work. And in that context, I think every organization is looking at how do you manage tomorrow, which will be the new normal. And in that, how do you plan for your workforce? If every element of an organization is impacted, then while on one hand, in last 1 year, we looked at many things as challenging, but there have been a lot of opportunities as well. And they're tested. A lot of experiments have happened and people have found them to be very, very successful. So while it challenged every aspect, it also threw up opportunities for everyone to test something. I remember that, pre-COVID era, we used to talk about tomorrow and let's prepare for tomorrow. And then the whole COVID, this pandemic, fast forward everything, got fast forward. And tomorrow is here. And now what are we doing about it? Now we are preparing. Now we should be prepared for it today. So a lot of things have been happening. A lot of things have been done. And I'm sure every industry is impacted differently. I'm sure there are industries which got impacted very, very adversely. And for them, a whole lot of, the customer disappeared. It evaporated kind of. It wasn't there. And in the process, what do you do? What do you do? What are you there for? But still, you had to exist as an organization. There were organizations where nothing happened. I mean, impact was only minimal. There were some organizations which were in between. Now, all of them have a context, but the context is that all this has redefined the elements of workforce planning. And we need to see how different organizations are looking at it, using it, what are different elements which have changed, how the workforce planning will happen in future, what kind of different, as I was mentioning earlier, the workforce, workplace, everything is changing. So in the new setup, how the people aspect will fit in. What kind of people, what kind of skills, what kind of competencies, what kind of culture, what kind of governance, all that, including structure. And you heard You heard recently, I mean, the last session, Mr. Mohan Pai was mentioning about, that how managers were happy to come and supervise people. That's why they were happy to come in. I mean, one of the reasons, they used to enjoy that everyone is around. You can see, you can feel, yes, then there is attendance, there is, a record of all kinds of things. So direct supervision, all that is disappeared. So what will happen? Do you still continue with the same kind of structure, or it's a different structure? Do you still continue with the same kind of skills, or different skills, different competencies? Do you require same kind of people, same kind of contracts, same kind of employment? Maybe not, maybe very different. Now, it's very interesting that I have a set of panelists here who represent different industry segments, different industries. I mean, if you look at Rachna, she comes from the energy technology company. We have Piyush, who comes from IT, ITS, that whole IT space. And we have Raj, who's coming from aviation industry. Three different industries. And I come from pure manufacturing, steel, hardcore, core. So we have a good spread of industry here to understand that in this context, what is workforce planning and how it is getting impacted. So I think I'll ask each of our panelists to share that what's happening in the space of what is in their context, in that their industry context, how the whole workforce is being planned and what kind of impacts it has because of the disruptions which have happened. So let me begin with Rachna. Rachna, if you could share that.
Thank you so much, Suresh, and hello to everybody. What a privilege to be here to be discussing with all of you. I would just share that the context of my industry really is, though, quickly Suresh did touch upon it, is to be leading the digital transformation in energy management and industrial automation. What that really means is that we have products and services right from LV/MV switchgear to buildings related automation to drives which work in heavy industries and process automation, UPSs, transformers, equipment. In this entire gamut of products and solutions that we provide, which is a combination of all of this, we have a global supply chain, which is the manufacturing. We have R&D, we have IT, and all these are global. So they are India for India and India for globe. And then we have, of course, the commercial and the sales part of it. Now, what has been happening? So what has been happening is not very different from what has been happening to the world. In terms of the mega trends, we have seen, as Suresh said, 2025 being advanced to 2020. So the acceleration of adoption of digital is what one of the mega trends has been. Thankfully for us, we were on this journey for the last 5 years of digitization, of digital capability building and remote and flexible working. So that has come a bit to our help. The other thing is about the sense of urgency on the climate change and the focus on sustainability. Now, this happens to be a mission of Schneider Electric. This is what it stands for. So we were very closely connected to it. And then, the need for organization workforces, which could be diverse, digital, and, open talent. So this is another aspect of the ecosystem. And then, of course, is all about the redefinition of roles and the upskilling. So what ended up happening in the last few days was that during the pandemic, we coached our customers and partners to be even more digital. And we spend a whole lot of time on that. As a result of that, we developed internal and external tools so that internally and externally, we had a lot of tools internally, but externally and internally, we could start doing business in a digital format, accepting the fact that the world is not going to change very fast. It's going to remain out there. And so, that being so, what we really started doing is we have redefined a new way of working digitally, doing sales digitally. And that is what we have started going to customers for, which means that, it gives us a very different aspect of who the talent can be. Also, this has some aspect of different capabilities. So simultaneous to this, globally, we took a call that Schneider Electric globally will be a hybrid working company. It will not be work from anywhere, and it will not be fully work from office. So it will be a hybrid company, and which we announced. So this is our way of working for times to come now. It's not in a short period at all. This is the way we will work. So this needs us to reflect on broader shifts, supporting continuous business performance and diverse employee needs. And hence, what we started doing was to recalibrate our workforce for these needs and see what this workforce segments are going to be like. Now, what I mean here is we started looking at each function and each business and culling out what are the different roles there, started assessing it on an axis of impact on value chain and availability of skills, availability of the skill set. And that gave us this four critical, core, specialist, and flexible kind of roles. And then we toyed with the idea of what all needs to be a regular workforce, what all needs to be a gig workforce, and how do we do it. So for example, if we were to look at HR itself, when we did in the current strategy that we have, though the strategy is evolving, probably all these talent management and learning kind of roles, which are very, very specialist roles, can actually become gig roles. It's like a doctor going to 5 hospitals to deliver their services, and a gig worker on these roles could do the same. Also, another thing that we realized is very interesting is about, millennials anyway love to, millennials and Gen Z, to work for the higher purpose, maybe do a CSR one day, do a org work another day. And with that, we combine the aspect of silver talent, as we call it, or, talent like me, which is in few years going to be out of the workforce. And some of these also came into a similar pattern. In fact, interestingly, yesterday in the ET, there was this article on gig route to corner office. Can CEOs on specific missions join organizations for a few months and just deliver that task and be focused on that task? I do hope it happens for CFOs and CHROs also. But, so the world of workforce is going to be transforming very, very well, very rapidly. And we are using some technology to actually aid to this, But Suresh, if you want, probably I can come to that a little later once we get to hear from all the other panelists.
Yeah, thanks, Rachna. I think that was well articulated in terms of what you're doing in your space, in terms of looking at the roles and redesigning as to who and what roles can be done as gig roles, basically, from anywhere else, and apart from the rest of it. So I think very interesting. And then silver workforce, I think that is something very interesting concept in terms of finding out people who could be useful in multiple places at different locations and different maybe different industries, different organizations, and I think that's something interesting concept. Great. So now I'll move to Piyush. I think let's hear from Piyush. It's another exciting industry, which, as I understand, didn't really get impacted too much, but has actually inside. If you get inside, perhaps you'll get to know that how much, how big a change which has happened there, and subsequently it is going to impact and rewrite the new way of working. So Piyush, over to you.
Thank you, Suresh, and wonderful to be a part of this session. Thank you, AIME, for inviting us. Suresh, so, I'll start with, were we not impacted as an industry as much as others? I think that's a nuanced question, and I'll answer it in two ways. Think about our company, which is 100,000 people, give or take a few here or there, across 20 plus countries, operating across 60 plus delivery centers. Think about these 100,000 people doing, in many cases, critical and confidential client work, which has traditionally been done out of office. Then the context of, the lockdowns And therefore, a situation which I think, frankly, nobody was really prepared for, right? So all of us had business continuity plans, disaster recovery plans, etc. But to be transparent, none of us had anticipated something on this scale happening. So then think about having to get 100,000 people to then work from home without disrupting client activities. So, moving laptops and desktops to people's homes through curfews, through situations which, would not enable easy transition. Think about data security, think about, internet availability, think about, continuous supply of electricity to make sure that the systems don't go down. A lot of things that we take for granted, we at least took for granted, were tested. And in that environment, to get 100,000 people from working from home, we thought was a spectacular achievement. Even till date, we have about 90% of that population working out of homes or anywhere for that matter. So, was our industry impacted? I think everyone was impacted. Did we have the benefit of being able to come back very quickly? I think yes, with the spectacular effort, of our operating teams, infrastructure teams, IT, etc., etc. Now, with that background, to go back to the context of workforce planning in our company, look, the way we tend to think about this is kind of like supply chain in a CPG or in a manufacturing company. Why do we think about it like that? 65% of our revenues are people costs. And therefore, it is the most critical element in being able to deliver our services. It's not about a brand. It's not about a molecule that we've developed. It's not about technology. At the end of the day, it's, in professional services, it's about people. And therefore, the workforce planning we look at as a very, very critical supply chain kind of thought process. What did COVID do? Now, what COVID did, 3 or 4 things. Number one, the pace of transformation, as you know, increased dramatically everywhere. The pace at which people adapted to technology, the pace at which people were willing to work from anywhere, the pace at which businesses, most of our clients, went online. The prevalence of online commerce changed dramatically. Talent became available everywhere. You could deploy talent from anywhere because all you needed was a terminal, a laptop, and connectivity. And then experience and well-being became very important. Okay. When I say experience, the whole concept of thinking about employees like our end customers, trying to make sure that employees get a consumer grade experience as well. Now, are we there? We are not there. This is a journey. Okay. It will take a while to get there. But I think those were the changes that we saw happening. So what did we do differently, or what did we benefit from? Number one, our approach has always been to build talent rather than buy talent predominantly. Building talent for us, the implications, Suresh, were that, with this rapid pace of change, you need to hire people who have the ability to learn and unlearn and then learn and then unlearn again. Okay. Nothing else is important. Everything can be learned. There is more than enough knowledge out there. What you need to hire for is learning agility, and you need to hire for energy, because our view is you can't teach people energy. Everything else can be taught. The balance, for example, build takes time. So, 85 to 90% of our people were, talent that we built. And then the balance 10 or 15, you buy because you need that talent immediately to be able to fulfill immediate demands before the skilling engine comes up to speed. In this whole context, the power of demand forecasting, analytics, visualization, reports, etc., just, we took that to a different level. And it started with it needed a collaborative effort. So it couldn't just be HR doing it. Think about, the way our business works is we do a deal with a client and we say, okay, now we will transform your finance and accounting processes, right? So upfront, from when the bid negotiation starts with the client, the sales engine has to feed that, look, I need 1,000 people in the following locations by this time. And then, that input comes into operations. We then look at how many of our existing people we can redeploy, how many new people we need to hire, so all of this goes into an algorithm which then develops whether we need to hire, build, or buy the talent. And then, so therefore the technology enabling it becomes very important. Now think about this. Demand comes in, you say you need 500 people with closing and reporting skills in the finance and accounting business. Now you go internally and say how many people who you can deploy so that they see career development and they start doing jobs, bigger and better than what they were doing earlier. And therefore it has to marry into the internal marketplace where all our employees can see what's coming up and therefore apply for those roles. Based on releasability and based on skills. And then whatever is not fulfilled internally, you bring in from outside. So as you can figure, it's a reasonably complex set of variables which go into building this algorithm. We are in the process of refining it. Again, it's not a complete journey. We keep learning as we are going along. And then finally, you have to marry it with the reskilling engine. Okay. All the time, your reskilling has to continue to be up to speed. So, our platform is called Genome, and we've logged roughly about 500,000 hours a month on people learning during the pandemic, which is, quite an incredible scale, 500,000 hours of learning a month. Results, we've been able to deploy people 2x faster than what we were able to. Our attrition has come down by 5 to 10 percentage points. Now, part of the attrition came down during the pandemic. In any case, I think across, it was a secular reduction in attrition across industries, but we believe this has had a meaningful role to play in that. And we've increased our internal redeployments by 3x, which means people seeing career development, people seeing promotions. Learnings, number one, you have to look at this as an end-to-end process. Number two, context is very important. The context of my company is very different from the context of other companies. So when you try and create a solution, it's important to understand the context of the company, the industry, and the culture. And then finally, this thing about creating consumer grade experience for employees. So those have been our learnings. At the end of all of this, I have to say, have we got it perfect? Absolutely not. Is this a journey? Yes, it is. But it is really, really key for us.
Thank you. Thanks, Piyush. I think, again, it's a different industry. And as I mentioned in my introduction itself, that, while from outside, it may appear that impact is less because people are working in the office. Now they're working from home, but it's the same. The work goes on. But as you rightly mentioned, that there are a whole lot of things which are required in order to enable it. And I think that itself was a different kind of skill which was needed. And second, I think with the pace changing, as you mentioned, that the algorithm which is required is also different, and the kind of complexity that it throws up. So thank you. I think that is another inputs in terms of workforce planning, saying that while you had a set of people, a different kind of people, you need to look at these elements now, as you mentioned, that learning agility has to be very high now as compared to what it was earlier. And hence you need to put in all those the screens to make sure that the force which is coming in, so boundary conditions are such that only that set of people, or most of them, with the learning agility, they only come in. I think we'll develop or delve on it a little more later. So let's hear from Raj now. Raj, over to you. You were the one in industry which suddenly came to a standstill completely. Everything was frozen, kind of. And so how was it? How has it impacted, and what is going to happen in this space of workforce now and planning for them? Over to you, Raj.
Thank you, Suresh. And coming right after Rachna and Piyush, I feel like one of those poor cousins from the countryside. And mine is not even a nuanced question. Piyush could actually say it was nuanced, and there was no nuance in the aviation industry. We were completely shut for 2 months. So there was 2 months of no activity. The planes were all parked, and all we had to do was to keep maintaining those planes. But there was so much happening even during that time that it was important for us to do then, which is giving us some results today. The thing that I think impacted the industry was each day during the time when we were completely grounded, um, we were spending 40 crores a day. So on a monthly basis, the expenditure was 1,600 crores, and for 2 months, when you're locked, you spend more than 3,000 crores right there with absolutely no revenues. And how do you then make up for that in the rest of the year, yet doing all the right things that the people in the company deserve to be done for, was something my team and I did. I think we did a fairly good job with that. Now, in terms of the airline industry itself, it runs in a wafer thin margin, as you all know. And outside of Indigo, I don't think there's been any other airline in the country that really has had turned profits. And of course, last year was different, or rather, this year is different, and where we will, probably, the first 3 quarters have been lots of losses. Now, as far as Indigo is concerned, customers trust us for our on-time performance, our lean and clean machines, as we call it. We may be a low-cost airline, but the cabin is as clean as any other full-service airline can be. The toilets are as clean. Our meal service is the hot meal service is actually hot water mixed into everything. But that is also something customers, some of them come and say, your upma is great. Now, so those are things, customers really like. Pre-COVID, Suresh, we were doing 1,700 departures. 1,700 departures a day, of course, 1,700 landings as well. And, during the 2 months of lockdown, it was 0 departures. And so when we restarted on 25th of May, we started with whatever, 15, 20 departures. And today I'm very pleased. We are averaging 1,200 departures a day. And this is March 2021. And that kind of makes us the largest domestic airline from the number of passengers flown. And all this happened during the 2 months. So it's a very regulated work environment. Regulated from a regulator standpoint. The regulator mandates crew utilization, rest timings, recurrent trainings for both safety and regulations, etc. So those 2 months, we made sure that our crew had continuous training and their certificates were in force. Quite interestingly, you could be an engineer that's working on all our 3 aircraft, Airbus 321, Airbus 320, and ATR. And one morning you realize your certificate is not valid anymore, and they won't let you touch the machine, as though you forgot everything that you did the day before. So it's a very complex workforce planning model in my mind. And it's a very integrated activity in many ways. For us, the aircraft utilization, the amount of time she flies in the air, actually drives our crew and staff scheduling, and which in turn drives our headcount planning. So there are lots of unknown variables. Today, we can only fly 80% of our planes. So we own, we have 280 airplanes, and we can only fly 80% of them. So we had to get into a lot of different businesses that we had never done before. Like, for example, cargo. And for the first time, Airbus ever approved, flying cargo in the passenger cabin, which means we actually sat cargoes like you and I sit. And then we bought a net and we covered it with a net. Those is all, I mean, we can call it jugaad, but the thing is, how do you get, revenues and how do you utilize the planes? More than anything else, it was utilizing your assets. The second was we did a lot of passenger charters. And to an extent that we had never done that before. And I'd heard a lot of stories about passenger charters. And one of the most amazing personal stories I'd heard, Suresh, Piyush and Rachna, was how a family of two, chartered our plane from Mumbai to Bangalore. And two of them on a Airbus 320 had the plane sit in the airport. And the two of them took a car, went and picked up their pet and came back and flew back again. And obviously, these are things that you hadn't ever thought was ever going to happen. Now, coming to, workforce planning, our crew optimization is a very big deal after how we optimize our aircraft utilization. Now, we use a lot of software, much like what Piyush was mentioning. We use a software from a company called Jefferson for our crew. We are now doing GroundStar, or what we call Inform, for the ground staff. We have a homegrown software for engineers. We have the HR hub for non-crew. Our operations control center actually analyzes schedules and loads. And all of these make it a fairly complicated activity and a complex activity. Now, I can do all of this, but guess what? The slots to where I can actually fly into have to be allocated by the airports. So, we are now flying to about 75 domestic destinations. Our international hasn't still opened up. But these slots, slots is where you actually land, or when you take off, or when you park at nights. These have to be approved by airports. And these are, you need to then deal with, these 75 of them. It could be Airport Authority of India, or it could be private airports. And the other complexity is, how do you do code share agreements? I mean, how do you do interline agreements? Now, a lot of Indians were coming back into the country on the Vande Bharat flights, but once they land in either Mumbai, Delhi, or Bangalore, and now it's kind of opened up, they had to be, transported to other places. So all that had to happen. And I talked about the regulatory requirement. And, there are breath analyzer tests. If you have consumed alcohol in the last 24 hours, and if you smell of one, and sometimes the breath analyzer also catches the scent, or the body spray people use. And we kind of say, what not to use and what to use. And with all of this, you need to be able to forecast non-availability of crew and technicians. Now, what this means is you need to use advanced analytic tools to use past data. And it doesn't end here. Some airports have 150 departures a day. Like Delhi, we have over 150 departures. There could be another airport like Dibrugarh with 2 departures a day. Now, how much staff should we schedule for either of these 2 departures? Because there are certain mandatory regulatory requirements that you need to follow. Now, so one of the measures the airline industry has is, how many employees do you employ per aircraft? Now, obviously, the larger the number of your fleet and more departures, it can actually come down. But when you're not able to utilize your aircraft, you still need people. And it kind of keeps going back up and forth again. In all of this, there were a lot of HR considerations to do. And of course, we have heard of all the great things about engagement. And I'm not getting into any of that, other than there were 2 things that I changed. And we changed it in 2020. From an annual survey, I moved to a bi-monthly, twice a month kind of pulse question. So the same 32 questions that we used to ask, now I ask 3 times a year at different times. So I kind of know if somebody thinks differently of the same question in the month of August as compared to the month of January. So that is one part. The second one, with all the machines that we use, Suresh, the software I told you, the machines do the scheduling, but they don't have a heart, right? And so there is a certain regulatory norm in terms of what rest I should get. Now the machine would do exactly the same amount of rest. So for example, if I finished a flight at 3 a.m. in the morning, the machine will allocate me for another 3 a.m. flight tomorrow and another 3 a.m. flight. And it can be really frustrating for the employee, which means that, you need to have a lot of manual interface. And in fact, one of the projects that I'm running along with my teams is to make sure, how do we make these machines learn? And then we realize, we taught these machines ourselves. So the machines are not learning something new, but these are all inputs that went from employees. The other one we want to resolve is, how do we, a lot of people want to swap. They want to say, I want to swap my leave, I want to swap my duty timing, and the schedule, and we need to do that in a way the schedules don't impact, yet keep the engagement really high. So to a large extent, how well the employee is engaged has a lot to do with the customer service she provides. So it's a huge area of interest, not just for me, but for my whole leadership. So let me pause here and then, take the discussion forward.
Great, thanks, Raj. I think that was very interesting. I think you have seen good days and not so good days in the last 1 year itself, I think, and the industry has been through a really difficult time. And I think one common question that comes to my mind is at this point is that I think different requirements which came up because of the situation we got in the pandemic, created. It was a disruption. All right. So such kind of disruptions can happen in future as well. And you don't know what kind, like it was not known just a day before all that started. So looking at this, which is that the disruptions could become commonplace in future, what is the change measures in terms of our workforce planning that you were putting in the organization, so that we are not in similar kind of pain in future? Of course, disruption will create some pain, but it's not similar kind. It's much less. So what is the learning coming out of it, so that anybody who is going forward, setting up a new organization, puts that also in place in terms of what is required? So what new skills, new competencies, new culture, new structure, what is it that's needed, which needs to be put in place to handle such kind of situation? So we can start off with anyone. Maybe Piyush, let's start from you this time. And you did mention about a few things in terms of, you're looking at how the agility in terms of deployment of people, the skill, and all that is required. That's one piece, definitely. What else? Is there anything in the culture itself? Because it will impact people. People say, well, earlier you were giving me 3 months time. Now today you're saying that within a week's time you get ready. No, this is not fair. So I'm just saying that how do you create that culture where people are also ready to understand and accept it? It becomes a part of the culture. Yes, the time frame has been crashed, and it is only the point. Is there anything else which is?
Yeah, great question, Suresh. Look, I think the answer lies fundamentally in do people get something good out of this? At the end of the day, our ability to go there. See, I've always had a view, as perhaps I'm in a minority as an HR person, that business needs always come first. If you take care of business needs, people needs will get fulfilled much better. The second thing that we've learned in our business, we are a 20-year-old company. We've had the benefit of having grown every single year. That growth is a great problem to have. Okay. Once business grows, it takes care of a bunch of other things. I've had early in my career the experience of working in industrial relations, where I learned so much. But fundamentally, my view is that you get bad industrial relations when growth goes away. It creates an entirely different set of problems. But you're not a debate on that, so you will have a view on this, and Raj will have a view on this, and Rachna will have a view on this, but we can discuss that separately. So now, once growth is coming in, it's a great challenge to have, because what it allows us to do is it allows us to grow careers, it allows us to develop people. But you have to be able to do this in a way that allows change to happen fast. Because one of the things we are very clear about, Suresh, is I can't predict what the world, no one predicted the pandemic. No one predicted what are going to be the relevant skills 3 years from now. I can tell you the half-life of most skills is less than a couple of years, right? So therefore, what becomes important? I can't just hire people, let them go 2 years from now and hire a new set of people, because that will not create a consistent experience for my people, for careers, for our clients. And therefore, the ability to train and reskill and continuously train people becomes very important. So if you ask me, the most fundamentally important aspect of culture going forward has to be that learnability and flexibility that I want to learn. And that goes back to my point on hiring for the right skills, which in our view are only energy and learnability, right? Once you have that, you've then got to have a form internally and a culture internally where people learn every day. See, the days of instructional design to build a training program, in my view, are gone. The days of class learning for most of the stuff that we do are gone. Okay, is classroom learning more efficient than virtual learning? Yes, it is. But is my reach 75% virtual? Absolutely. And therefore, the downside is only marginal. The upside is huge. Therefore, are we creating that culture? Are we enabling that? Are we measuring it? Are we providing an experience to employees to learn well? And once they're learning, are they seeing their career develop? I think those, developing that ecosystem becomes really, really important. So to me, these were obviously changes that were happening, but the last 1 year's events have just dramatically increased the speed at which they'll happen.
Right. Thanks. I think that's quite important, and I think you said it very clearly. Let's hear Rachna. Let's hear from you. What is your view on that?
Thank you, Suresh. And let me just first touch on the evolution of the workforce that I was talking about initially. Actually, when this pandemic situation happened, we had to obviously control costs, because business for 2 months at least had gone completely on a spin. And then at that point of time, something that we wanted to do a little later, advanced launch of this AI-based open talent market. And the whole concept of this was that, employees don't inform their managers when they look for jobs outside. They just go and apply. So we will apply the same empowerment and freedom to our employees internally, which means this is an AI-based platform which we were ready to launch, but we advanced this launch where anybody could apply for any role anywhere in the world without checking with their managers. And if they get selected, the manager gets 3 months to relieve them. And all digital, and all the job also being digitally performed. So we got a great sort of resourcing where we were not hiring in those days, great resourcing across the world. Secondly, the way we decided to use it is also for additional projects. So, you could be doing your role, but there is an OTM, there is an OTM project. So somebody extends their hand. And so you get that done through part-time resourcing that can be done. And of course, we also used it for mentoring and mentor relationships, because it does this intelligent map between the profiles which are already there. So this helped us in some sort of emergency workforce planning, which is now the way to work. And it's a big cultural change, because managers were not used to letting people go till they are spoken to. So we had it for 3 years. Now it is after 6 months, if he wants to do, they can do that. So this was one learning and one implementation. Then I think something that Piyush spoke about, learning agility. We've converted it into, for 2 years now, into one of our values, which is called learn every day. So I was so glad when he called it out exactly like that. So learn every day is one of our values. And in science, the way we look at is about their learning agility. We say the 3A model: agility, ability, and aspiration. And out of which ability is the one that you can train for the most, right? So when you hire, when you build or you buy, and our journey is also more towards build and buy. This is what we have been focusing on. On the skill upskilling and the upskilling roadmap, what we decided to do was digital being the thing. For some time, we've been on this journey of digital skill building and persona-based learning. So we expedited this whole thing. Our way of doing talent reviews is, one aspect is assessment of the digital citizenship for employees. So, there are categories that a manager actually calls out. You're a basic, intermediate, advanced, or expert. But we also allowed people to do their self-assessment. And depending on what result they got out of that self-assessment of digital capability, they would be guided to a e-learning, which helps you become more digital. So this is one of the skills, because the whole business model, the whole workforce model is all about moving to the remote and digital kind of space. So, and while acquiring talent, we've started looking at this as one of the big, aspects. So we really target and measure how much digital skill have we acquired in the year, how many people we can call as digital. But what came across also for salespeople was social selling, value-based selling, consultative selling. And at the base of it, the culture shift which we are working on right now, which is very, it is very needed. It's always needed, but all the more when you're going through this digital journey, is of the managers enabling, empowering, and making the whole environment trust-based. So, how do your leaders really change the approach with which they are working? And the other learning is around, when you have this hybrid workforce, it's just not about having this workforce and the gig models or whatever. We're just experimenting with it. But, the cultural shifts and the governance is very important. So while you will get productivity and utilization of incumbents, but you have to have the right kind of cybersecurity. There's a whole host of governance matters which comes into being if you really want to go down this path, which we've started, working on. And the last thing that I would say, leaders need to really prepare for, expectation management of a remote and flexible, so flexible. Flexibility was few times in a month. Now it is every hour of the day. So such a flexible workforce, how do you manage the expectations? Actually, very interestingly, we did an engagement survey in the middle of the pandemic, and our scores went up by 6 points, because people felt got even more communication than we would have got if we had worked face to face, because people were taking extra care of it. Also, what started happening is people who were in different cities to the leader felt the people who are in the same city get more FaceTime. And now it was very egalitarian. Everybody got same virtual time. So that also helped. The communication helped. But for leaders to really drive empathy and concern for well-being, mental and physical, of employees became really the key. And there many of our initiatives like the counselors, etc. came in. So I think this is how we've looked at this journey. And I think it's going to stay there that way and become even more deeper than anything else.
Great. I think, there are a whole lot of things which resonated with what Piyush was also mentioning, in terms of saying that you need to look at the learning agility. And the other aspect of the governance piece that you mentioned, that if you have to shift work home, I think there are a whole lot of governance process also that you put in place. And that's what he was also mentioning, as how quickly they had to do that. And that was one of the challenges. And they have done it, and I'm sure they would have mastered it by now. We can always look at their help, whosoever wants to do it now. Okay, with that, I think Raj, let's hear from you in terms of what kind of changes are you looking at in terms of the whole workforce planning process?
Sure, lots of good inputs from both Rachna and Piyush. One of the things we not that we realize now, but we know for sure, is a single staffing model does not apply to our 75 airport destinations because of the disparity of sizes and departures and night halls and all of that. The other one, and we are closely studying that, is we have over 10, 12 different work groups across the company with over 100 subsets of roles. Now, how do we then make sure that these either we bring down the number of subsets of roles, or do we have a higher amount of cross-pollination and cross-training, if I may call it that way, so you can get optimum utilization of people, yet making sure areas like fatigue and is not there, and rest, all of these happen. That's the second one. The third one we realized is, each of these subsets of roles and staffing model itself, we have unique standards. There are very unique standards, which is the Indigo standard, and majority of them are actually regulated by certifications and currency of your licenses, etc., etc. And we have continued to upgrade our ability to understand. And imagine you're talking of 23,000 people, of whom at least 18,000 or have some certification or currency of licenses, and you need a really robust way of being able to handle when is what coming up, etc. So that's a new kind of skill in our training function. And again, we run. I'm very proud of our iFly Training Academy. And pre-COVID, I used to have at least 1,000 people training every day. And we have the training academy both in Bangalore and in Gurgaon. And during this year, and which was completely unknown in the airline industry, we converted a lot of training to virtual training. And a lot of these training have to be approved by the regulator. So it's not as though you can just convert and start teaching them. You need to go get it certified by the regulator. And these are things. I mean, in addition, we need to get the validity of both this training as well as certifications to be maintained electronically. And on top of that, we have lots of other initiatives in terms of engaging, and we are closely looking at our spans and layers and see how those will come. The intent is, how can we be a more leaner and fitter organization, yet have people, be the center of our universe. So that's a puzzle which will take some time to solve. Like Piyush said, I don't think we have solved it, but we know where we are heading to.
Thank you. I think that's something interesting. And I think on the last point that you mentioned, that the aim is to become leaner and fitter. I have a question, to all of you in terms of saying that, what does it mean if everyone is looking at leaner and fitter organization? Does it mean that the jobs will shrink? Number of jobs will be lesser overall because everyone becomes lean? Or does it mean that the nature of job will change, and the existing set will be done, or existing operations or existing businesses, the way they have been the way we have been doing that will become leaner, whereas there is another set which will come up, and hence overall net there in expansion of jobs. So what's your take on it? Let's hear. So Rachna, first, over to you.
Okay, so my take on this is that with all this automation and the shift of workforce which is happening, it's really difficult to say jobs will reduce or expand or what will happen. But one thing I'm very sure is that jobs will change, job roles will change their nature. So the reskilling aspect will become very important. Most of the repeatable jobs will go, the strategic will stay, things like I heard in the last discussion that was happening, last panel, more need for interpersonal, more need for engagement will be there. So there will be roles which in HR and in business and everywhere else, where certain aspects will be needed repeatably, certain will go to automation, robotics, etc. And, people will have to be, the learning agility again comes into the play, because you need to keep reskilling for different kinds of roles. So I think that is going to be, in my view, the way the world will evolve.
Okay, all right. Okay, thanks. Yeah, so Piyush.
So I actually believe that there is an opportunity for more and more. It isn't one or the other, it is both. And again, it goes back to fundamental business models. If they're creating value for their clients and the end users, then I think, it'll mean more opportunity for man. It'll mean man as in people, and it'll create more opportunity for machine, and it'll create more opportunity for technology. So I see the glass as actually half full rather than half empty.
Okay, you're saying that, this will lead to growth, and the growth will take care of the one side gets the other side you get more. In the process you have net, which is on platform of growth, right? Great. Raj, I think we are just about to reach the time frame that we had, but Raj, your views quickly.
Yeah, no, in addition to what both of them just said, and I don't want to repeat them, I think gig working is going to get more and more popular. Rachna, I think, alluded to it. I think once it becomes a very acceptable norm of working, you're going to get two things happening. One is you're going to get people who really like what they are doing will come and do that work. Secondly, you'll be, as an employer, you'll be able to use them exactly for the time that you need them to be. And if that means you pay a bit of a premium for that, you should be willing to do that. So it has to be a win-win. So if I'm a gig worker and I like singing in a pub in the weekend, and being an HR manager during the week, and probably teach in a NGO in the midweek, and together, if I can actually make more money than my current role, why not? And I'm going to do that with a lot more interest and passion.
Great. So we'll meet in the pub this Saturday, Raj. So that's a great one.
You don't want to hear me sing.
and hear you sing post that. Right. Okay. So I think that was wonderful. Great. Whole lot of things which have come out. I think it's difficult to summarize everything. But, it appears that, starting from whatever changes which have happened, there are changes which are required at the systemic level. There are changes which are required at the governance level. They are required at the way learning is happening, the way skills are prepared. There are changes which are there in culture. All this is required because workforce management is, it will have all these elements to be put together for making sure that you have right set of people, right set of capability, a right set of competency, right set of skills, to make sure that the business needs are met for today and you're ready for tomorrow. Because growth is coming tomorrow and you're planning for it today. So whatever you're doing keeping that in mind and making sure that tomorrow is also equally eventful for us, even though there is a disruption, we're ready for it. So with that, I think thank you very much for your valuable inputs, which have come in from different industries. And I'm sure there will be a lot of learning. There was a question regarding, I could see only one question. I think others have been answered. One question, which is about what is the difference between succession planning and workforce management. So I think somebody asked that question. I think it is simple. That succession planning you do for a specified role. And then some workforce planning is not just that. Workforce planning is that you need every role put together and starting from whether you need that role. And thereafter, you need to see that, what kind of people, what kind of skills, what level, what kind of compensation, so everything included is the workforce management, and succession planning is limited set of role and who are the right people who could succeed in that role. So that is the difference. I think, I hope I could answer that. With that, I think, thank you very much. Thank you, all the panelists. It was a pleasure. And I think Piyush will pick on that topic. We'll have discussion later on. And thank you very much.
You and Raj at the pub. And
you're most welcome. Rachna, you're also most welcome to join that, because it's a singing also that will go on in that pub. Thank you very much.
Thanks so much, everyone.
Thank you very much.
Such a nice session, Suresh. Thanks, Piyush. Thanks, Rachna.
Thank you.
To our session.
Thank you, everybody.
Tripathi. Thank you so much to our esteemed panelists, Ms. Rachna Mukherjee, Mr. Piyush Mehta, Mr. Raj Raghavan, for the wonderful session, hearing about your experiences of successfully handling workforce planning issues.